Alright, hello my fellow audience. So I just came up with the best idea about 3 days ago. So my idea was that I'm going to write a story. And I know if you've been on my Wattpad, I write a lot of stories and I never finish them. But for this story, this is not just a story. This is what I call my 5 stories in one. It is all one story put together, but when I think about it, it's not. See, the story is about 5 characters. There's Lydia, Natalie, Levy, Theo, and Nathan. Now, each of them, like any other person or character ever heard about, has their own personality, has their own something about them. But the difference between this story is that none of these characters ever meet each other. Except for 2 of them, which is Levy and Lydia, because they were friends from the beginning. But the rest of them never meet each other, but they're still all in the same story. So when I come back into my reality of thinking about the story, I think about if I was in another person's shoes that I didn't know, I try to think about something like that. Like, for instance, say there's somebody out there, maybe your neighbor, that you've never even talked to before. And maybe you don't know their life, but you just want to make up something in your head of what you think they live like based on how you see them. Now, you may see that person every day, maybe walking down the street with their friends, or driving everywhere, or you may see them walking a dog, or smoking, or skateboarding, what have you. And you're gonna think, you don't have your own opinion on them even though you've never met them. That opinion should stay in your brain. Like, even if it's good or bad opinion, it should stay in your brain. And what you should do with that opinion is make up a small story on what you think their life is like. And that's what I take my story into consideration too. I don't know if that really makes much sense to say, but I take that idea and put it in my story. If I see, for instance, if I saw my character Theo, you probably would see him every day just walking around sluggishly and not having a care in the world, but also being a bully to people. If you take him, for instance, but you don't really know much about his personality, you'd probably think what anybody would think. He's a bully. Now, in the story that I'm writing, yes, he is a bully, but there's other stuff behind it. And that's the thing that people don't realize, is that you take somebody that you see outside, someone you haven't really gotten to know, and you kind of judge them based on what you see. But in my story, I go into depth with what they are like, what's behind them. And with each character, you get to learn something about them. Now, I'll let you in on a little secret about Theo. Theo was badly abused when he was younger. And he still is badly abused in the story. But he's never going to tell anybody that because he wants to be strong. But if you see him outside, if he was a real person and you saw him outside and you didn't know him, you probably wouldn't know that he was bullied. Because he tries not to make it seem like he's bullied. He tries to cover it because he wants to be a strong person. And obviously you're not always going to be a strong person, and that's why he bullies. Because he's trying to get pleasure out of something. And the only pleasure he can get is if he feels like he's hurt someone. Not that he wants to hurt somebody. I mean, technically he does at the same time that he doesn't. He just wants almost to give a revenge on what his dad is doing to him. So when I stop and think about my story, and I'm thinking about what should happen next, I think of my previous events. For instance, somebody in my story gets drunk. If I just put something like, they get up the next morning, blah 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 blah, like they go eat breakfast, it's not gonna follow through with the story. It's gonna make the story seem out of balance and not realistic. And I want it to be realistic because anybody would want their story to be realistic. I mean, even if it's something completely ridiculous, like unicorns and princesses, even then you want your stories to be realistic. And how you do that is have the events that come after have to kind of flow with what has happened in the past. Now, if I, for instance, put she gets drunk and then she wakes up the next morning puking and she feels lightheaded and has a headache and she feels like crap, then that will follow through with the story because obviously that's what happens when you get drunk. But I don't know this because I've never been drunk. But that's what I see around me. Now, you know a little bit about my story because I basically gave you some of the gist of things. And if you guys have any suggestions for any of my characters that I told you about, or you or you just have an amazing idea, then please comment, and maybe I will mention you in my next video on that. So, yeah, bye.